Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What with Dan and Julie. Today we've got Tim Maddams on, who is a chef. Hi, Tim.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, thank you. Good. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what you're up to?
Well, right now I'm sitting in front of my laptop with a microphone and half a glass of wine because it's Tuesday.
Half a glass.
Oh, hang on, is it even Tuesday? No, it's Monday today, isn't it?
Oh,
I guess I'm
Tuesday.
confused.
It
It
is
is Tuesday. It is Tuesday. Thank God. Thank God. So that's what I'm doing there. But I was working quite a lot as a private chef. This year's been a little bit awkward on that front. But I do a bit of private chefing. I run and host some little field sports days in the wintertime. And I teach people about cookery. I write a little bit about cookery. It's all about food, really, in my life.
So where did this love of food come from?
Oh, well, I mean, just natural greed, I think, is a good starting point. And a sort of, I suppose, as I've got older and tried to sort of put that into words in a better way than just saying I'm greedy. It's for me about something that's an essential obligation. You have to eat or you die. Why would you not want that to be enjoyable and worth the time spent in doing it? Now, I know lots of people don't think like that. Food equals fuel. That's it. It's just a calorific / nutrient trade-off. I feel sorry for them, but for me, it's definitely not like that.
So were you, did you have anyone in your family growing up who was a good cook or anything that you were able to learn from?
Yeah, so I guess I was kind of pre-industrialized revolution of shoddy food availability, if you like. We grew up, my sister and I, with my mum in a little cottage that belonged to my granny. Otherwise, I think, we'd have been in a state housing scheme of some sort. My father was absent and there wasn't a lot of money. And I think when there's not a lot of money around back then, that tipped you into the balance of not buying any modern food and shopping in the old-fashioned way, because cooking was the only way you could afford to feed your family. At some point in the late 80s, that flipped and it became cheaper to buy processed, tampered with food. And I think that's the point at which people, for the first time in history, began to be poor, malnourished, and yet overweight at the same time.
We obviously did a bit of Googling around you, and sort of found that your ethos is quite, you like locally, responsibly found foods, and that's part of your cooking, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I mean, the greatest secret out there that is no secret at all is that if you want to eat great food, spend your time finding the people and the things that they grow or make, and then do very little with them in the kitchen, so that, when you get really good food that's grown by people who've really thought about it and really care about it, you end up with very simple job as a chef, in terms of cooking. It's just a case of putting great things together.
Yeah, it's much easier to make good quality ingredients taste nice than bad quality ingredients taste nice, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, that's the second sort of open secret of great food, in my opinion, is that the person cooking it needs to taste it. It's surprising how many people don't taste stuff as they're going along.
Yeah,
but
certainly.
I mean, that's and it's a bit of a cliche, but I know certainly when I was working as a full-time chef in various different restaurants, lots of chefs didn't taste stuff. You can't know what something tastes like unless you taste it.
So where did you start to learn becoming a chef properly? Did you go to school to learn it, or did you jump straight in and become working in a kitchen at some point?
Well, I sort of did both at the same time. So I was working as a pot washer in a sort of well thought of local-ish pub to where I grew up in the middle of Wiltshire. And I also went to I did a 2-year full-time GNVQ, which apparently stands for General National Vocational Qualification, but I'm pretty sure at the time was thought to mean got no valid qualifications. So I did this BTEC GMVQ advanced in catering and hospitality management, which is a bit of a mouthful, at Salisbury Technical College, which was, they tried really hard to deliver a comprehensive course, but you can't really learn to cook brilliantly in sort of 5 hours twice a week. You need a bit more time than that. So both is the short answer. I was working in a pub kitchen, started washing up and then making salads and desserts, and then onwards from there. But at the same time, I was at college, trying my best to be a good pupil.
And obviously, do you think it was worth going to the learning at a college, or would you actually recommend people to just get into a kitchen, start as a pot wash, and then work their way up?
Difficult. Probably first 8 years of working as a professional chef, I would have said that college was a waste of time. Beyond the sort of health and safety, I've managed to not blow anything up or set fire to myself things. But the dreadful thing about being a chef really is that the better you are, or at least the more competent you become at cooking in a restaurant setting, the further away you are taken from the creative cooking bit, and the more you're asked to do the ordering, the health and safety audit, the cosh management, the rota building, and the problem there is that you get chefs who are promoted because they're good at cooking, not because they're good at admin, and then they end up trying to manage a busy department and do all the admin, which is perhaps not something that they're geared up for, and often back in my day, things are much better now, I'm sure, but often perhaps weren't trained to do, were just expected to get on with. But after 5, 6, 7 years, I guess, of working, I started to appreciate the sentiment of what I'd learned at college, although most of it was, out of date by then in terms of management technique and legislation and stuff. And
what was your journey from obviously being that pot washer and going through college to where you are now? What did it entail for you? And was it a lot of long nights? I know a chef's life can be quite hard work.
Yeah, there's some on the face of it. There's very little to recommend the industry, to be honest. I mean, my first full-time job was for a company called Center Parcs, who I think you'll all be familiar with out there. Quite a well-known sort of European holiday firm. And I think, if I remember rightly, I was earning. Now, this would have been 1997, something like that, 1998, 1997, I think. And which obviously is a very long time ago, virtually prehistoric. I was earning, I think, £7,400 a year. And I was working on average 65 hours a week.
Wow.
So it wasn't, in terms of like sort of the initial bump into the industry, you sort of either made it in or you didn't. And fortunately or unfortunately, I did. I could cope with the long hours and the strange, I'm not sure if it was machismo or what it was, but there was definitely a sense or a feeling that if you couldn't hack it, if you couldn't do the hours, if you couldn't work 7 days a week, breakfast, lunch and dinner, when someone else was on holiday, you had no right being in the kitchen. And I really don't think that was a good thing. That was a very old-fashioned way of thinking about stuff. But I got sucked into it like a lot of other people do and believed it for a very long time. And in fact, took it with me a long way through my career and expected other people to just put up with it because that's the way the industry was. And we had a head chef there, actually, who used to say quite tritely, that's the trade, I'm afraid. That's catering. Oh. And we used to say, I sort of think, that's a great thing, it rhymes. it must be good. But it wasn't until later that I thought, if everyone keeps saying that, it's never going to get better. It's just going to be a shame. I look around, when I was 25, I'm looking around and there's no one else in the kitchen over 40. And those that have either been divorced once or twice or have drink problems or whatever. And I thought this is not a long-term, this is not a long-term game. And
So
that's
is that
changing.
when it changed for you? Is that you had sort of an epiphany moment?
No, not really. I just sort of ignored that and carried on doing what I was doing. Because what I meant to say is that the flip side of that is that the industry is enchanting, right? You get to work with creative people at the wrong time of day. You immerse yourself in it. You're excited about the process. Yes, there's boring bits like peeling potatoes and washing dishes and getting things wrong, and putting date labels on stuff and all the boring bits that go with every job. But in the middle of it, it's this exciting, adrenaline-led, getting ready for service, creative, food-driven process, which ultimately is about making people happy. You want to put something on the plate that makes someone stop and just have a moment and go, "That's delicious." Well, that's the aim, right? So all the bad stuff is kind of balanced out by this need, this connected need and desire to be good at what you do, and to produce great food. And you meet some, it's full of incredibly interesting, dysfunctional, creative, funny, tired, exhausted, worn out, brilliant people.
And I guess, what is a chef's average day?
Well, we used to have something when I worked in London. I was in London for a while, about 5 years, I think, maybe slightly longer. There was a break in the middle. I get confused, but one of the people that I worked for when I was up there was a chap called Marco Pierre White, and he wasn't in the kitchen in those days, although he did pop in and terrorise us all from time to time. He was actually quite a fun guy. We used to arrive with a couple of hundred partridge and have a quick chat and then disappear again. But it was quite stressful. And there we used to have a system where you would work. Let me see. I think we worked 8 days and then had 5 days off, or 7 days and had 4 days off, something like that. So you'd do 7 days straight and then have 4 days break, or you'd have 2 days and then break it up that way. And you would get one single shift or half day, as it was called, in that run, and I think the rest of the days would be what we euphemistically called a split shift or a double. So a double would be arrive at work at 8 o'clock in the morning, prep and work through for lunch, serve lunch, get cleared down, head off, usually to the pub for a couple of hours. In those days, not the best idea, I'm sure. And then at sort of 5 o'clock, maybe 5:30, 5:45, back into the restaurant, gear up for night service, serve supper until 10, back down the kitchen, 11, 12 o'clock, leave and go home. And you do that for, as sort of 6 of your 7 days or 7 of your 8 days. And then you'd have one day, which was a half day. You have a single shift in a day, which is entertaining, as that would be sort of 8 in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which most people would consider to be longer than an average working day.
Now, obviously, for being a chef, the majority of it is producing the same meal, night in, night out sort of thing. But when you get to create a new dish, what's that like? Creating almost a new menu, is that quite a good experience for the team in the kitchen?
Yeah, if you're involved, I think that's the best jobs. The best jobs in cooking for me have always been the ones where you get to make the decisions. You get to at least put some dishes forward, and that's a really important part, I think, of managing a team. Not that I knew that when I was managing teams, but looking back, I think you should always allow the team around you to have some kind of creative input. Otherwise, they're getting a bit of a bum deal, really. And I think lots of fantastic kitchens out there do that, and that's the best bit, really, finding the time to wedge in a bit of creativity. And if you can make a dish and put it on the table for everyone at tasting time, and they all turn around, or they all stop in their tracks and look at you, and you go sort of, yeah, found one. Found a dish that everybody likes. Awesome. It's going on the menu. That really is that's the joy of it.
And what personality traits do you see in yourself and other chefs around you that you think really, really help you thrive?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Well, I think everyone has different, because there's two sides to it, right? Because there's the sort of, the slightly dysfunctional hours going on, which is very difficult if you've got a family, or you have a relationship with someone who's not working similar hours, then one of the things you definitely need is a bit of determination and a very good sense of humour. And then I think for the positive side, and that I include in that really great, there's brilliant people out there who are brilliant cooks, but above and beyond that, they're fantastic kitchen managers. They're brilliant heads of department. I definitely, wasn't one of them. My chefs used to really enjoy phoning me up on rota day and explaining that they couldn't work shifts, twice at the same time. That was temporarily impossible. I wasn't very good at that. And so I think the character traits that you need are determination and desire to actually do it. But you also need honesty with yourself. So one of the things in the industry that perhaps happens a bit less now than it used to was if you didn't like somewhere you were working or you didn't get on, you didn't mess about, you just left and got another job. Now, right now, that's not possible. I can't imagine anyone with a decent chef's job right now is thinking anything about leaving it because, the industry's in crisis as we speak. But certainly, a bit of self-awareness in terms of if you're doing something and it turns out it's not for you, to just crack on and go and find something else. And I think those traits are the ones that you look for, along with the other stuff that you just need to be a good employee, an understanding of a hierarchy system, an understanding that you're being paid for your time, you need to be there, with the counterbalance of that should be a respectful two-way street rather than a, you work for me, you put me at the top of your life kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you find that the professional or the chef industry has almost like a mentoring system going on? Is there chefs that are quite willing to bring people in and teach them?
Yeah, definitely. And those really are the chefs who are successful, because if you don't do that, you can't get good, reliable staff. I mean, there's been a staffing shortage in the industry since I was at college. They were talking about it, and no one stopped talking about it, and it's got worse. I think there was for a long time, there was a good supply of people who were reasonably good at mid-level kitchen work, who basically, because you didn't really need any qualifications, and maybe, whatever career path you planned hadn't quite gone right for you, you would end up working in a kitchen. Well, those guys have now got lots of other options that don't involve them being at work at 12 o'clock at night. And there are lots of jobs in food which perhaps you wouldn't need to be that qualified for, that might be in a food factory or a sort of process-driven kitchen, or in a public service kind of place, working in a hospital kitchen or somewhere like that. Those have sort of hoovered up all those people because the working life is better. And so the restaurant industry has really struggled for the lack of them. And so, to go back to your question, if you're not recruiting almost every person that appears to want to work with you and has a bit of spark about them, and doing your best to invest in them, then you haven't got a team, because you need to build that yourself these days. The staff are not sitting out there waiting for you to employ them.
What is it about the Marco Pierre Whites, the Raymond Blancs, the Gordon Ramsays that really sets them all apart from other chefs?
Good press. Good press, the right place, the right time. I have met countless chefs who are equally as good and as passionate as those big names you've just reeled off, and who are quietly running great restaurants, and you've probably never heard of them and are unlikely to ever do so. You don't need to be notorious or celebrated to be brilliant at what you do. I'm not sure there's anything sets them apart other than a bit of right place, right time. I mean, they've done phenomenal things. Do not get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from them. I mean, these are guys who are, realms of brilliance above where I'll ever be. They, astonishing people that have changed or contributed to changing the face of restaurant dining as we know it. I mean, Raymond Blanc and what he's done at the Manoir Quatre Saisons, just, that's an institution. It's a global institution of a place, So they have done incredible things, but I think there are lots of other people out there who have done them. So to set them aside is perhaps unfair, and certainly most of them, I think, would agree with that.
Is it maybe fair to say it might be the business side of running a restaurant that they've been, and the publicity side, maybe they've been particularly good at?
And maybe before publicity for restaurants was really a thing, perhaps they were having a go at it. There was definitely, behind great chefs, there's definitely great teams of people doing other, foresightful stuff. In terms of business, I mean, I can't count on all my fingers and toes the number of bad business decisions I've had reported to me by various famous chefs. I mean, it's a joke in the industry. It's like, oh, you've got some money to burn. You should sponsor a chef to open a restaurant. We're always getting asked, back in London, or I was by business people that I would meet that were working in finance or whatever. So, is it a money laundering operation? You get these questions, and well, God knows, maybe it was. I mean, there were times, I won't name employers, but there were times where, you get to the end of the month and your paycheck would arrive in a brown paper envelope stuffed full of cash. And it was a case of happy days, here's the money. Yeah. You didn't ask necessarily twice where it was coming from. I think certainly now, you don't. I mean, Marco's had more failed restaurant enterprises than you can have hot dinners for. I mean, I don't think there's much shying away from that as a fact, and yet he's retained his reputation and his brilliance, and has various successful enterprises as well. So, I think the more you dilute someone, the harder it is to replicate or get close to the level that they used to achieve, perhaps as a benchmark. It's very difficult to roll out a fantastic restaurant project, although lots of people continue to try and do so.
It's one of those industries that is just incredibly difficult, isn't it, to survive and thrive in?
Yeah, because it's something ephemeral about great cooking. I mean, it can be quite fleeting. Restaurants can be of the moment. Every now and again, you get an Ivy or a Caprice or a Manoir or I could name a few hundred, but that stand the test of time and go beyond that. But that doesn't mean that somewhere that was absolutely wicked for a couple of years isn't, in some ways, is almost better. It's like the band that splits up. You always be looking back to their second difficult album and going, that's when they were really, nailing it. And I think that, there's been a lot of great restaurants like that they're sort of fleeting, and you can have bad experiences in them like you can at any other restaurant. But if you had a good one there, it would be on your, ingrained in your memory forever.
So we've obviously spoken a little bit about what you're doing currently as a private chef. I know the current climate is a bit different for that. What does that sort of involve for you?
It's the gig economy, I guess, in one sense, and in another sense, it's the freedom to starve. I mean, you get to a point, certainly I got to a point where I was running a busy restaurant, and that was becoming less and less fulfilling for me from a point of view of getting more and more involved with spreadsheets. And I thought, well, I might as well just, I also don't want to carry on now. I've got 2 small children. I want to go and be a bit more of a family man. So I needed to do something independent. And working as a private chef is great because as long as you get enough bookings, you can more or less sort of work when you want to, and the flexibility between bookings can be quite good. So you basically advertise or get jobs via word of mouth, quote for the job, create the menu that they want for the job. And that could be a one-night dinner party. It might be a lunch party. It might be something bigger, like an event of some sort, although I try and steer away from big events because I'm not really geared up to do them, and it sort of becomes food by numbers eventually, which is a bit dull. And I'm a great believer that you shouldn't sort of compete with others too much. You should do what you do. And if people want you, then they'll come to you to do it. And then you sort of agree a price based on a day rate plus some ingredients and whatever travel requirements are needed to get you to the place and get you back again. And then the client will either sort of, they have an alarming habit these days of quibbling over the price, which is, Seems a bit of a shame. You know, even a sort of halfway good watercolorist probably gets what they ask for when, you know, when they're commissioned to paint someone's house. But anyway, I'm griping. You take the contract, they pay you a deposit, and that's it. They're booked in, and you deliver the event by hook or by crook, and then you issue an invoice, and that's that. Contract settled.
So you've had quite an interesting career. You know, you've written some books, you've done a bit of TV, but what are some of the biggest positives and opportunities you've got out of this career? I guess River Cottage would be one of the main ones.
Yeah, well, I mean, River Cottage was almost an accident, really. I mean, I remember watching a couple of episodes of Hugh's Cook on the Wild Side when I was at college and thinking, oh, that guy's interesting. He's doing something different. I'll have to go and check him out. And then obviously, you know, life gets in the way. And I actually went for the job at River Cottage. So I ended up at River Cottage as a sous chef in the new canteen they were opening. And I was put up for that job by my then fiance, and by the time I accepted the job, wife, because she was concerned that I'd moved to the West Country without a job and that I was going to get back from honeymoon with nothing to do. And she wasn't very happy about that. Because prior to that, I'd been working on a contract basis for a company providing hospitality for Formula One teams. So that had come to an end, and I was sort of thinking, oh, well, I'll get a job when we get back off honeymoon. Anyway, Caroline, my dearly beloved better half, spotted this advertisement that said, oh, River Cottage are recruiting. And she was like, oh, it's River Cottage are recruiting. And I didn't put two and two together, that Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall and River Cottage. So I just rocked up at River Cottage for a job interview, you know, with a loaf of bread under one arm and I think some pate I'd made under another, because I think, you know, if you turn up for a job interview as a chef without something to offer, you know, it's a bit disappointing, really. And I was interviewed by Gil and a guy called Dan. And Dan, who wrote the bread book for River Cottage, who was going to be the head chef for the canteen, they sort of said, okay, great, we'd like to give you the job as sous chef. And went backwards and forwards a bit over the deal, and that was fine. And I went off and got married, went off on honeymoon, came back, turned up for work. And Dan was no longer the head chef. He'd unfortunately fallen ill and had to leave. And someone else was the head chef there, and they lasted, I think, 2 months, maybe 3. And I was on my way from there as well, because I'd been offered a head chefship somewhere else by that time at a local restaurant, and it hadn't been, you know, I mean, it was very disorganized and a bit chaotic. And I thought, well, I've just got to go and do what I need to do. So I thought I'll be off. The head chef there that I was working for there then left quite dramatically. And the question was, oh, will you look after it until we find someone else? And I was sort of like, well, yeah, I'm starting a new job in 4 weeks. You've got 4 weeks to find someone else. And I started cobbling together, you know, my idea of what I figured, you know, we should be doing with all this incredible produce that was turning up. And then they said, oh, would you be the head chef? And I was like, well, I haven't really done that before. And Hugh said, look, we know you haven't done that before, but we quite like what you're doing. Would you do it? You know, we think you'd be capable. And I thought, oh, well, I'd be capable, and that would be nice. There'll be lots of support from the bigger team and whatnot, and they'll help me with the bits that I don't get, and I'll be able to cook, and we'll get a team together, and that'll be great. And off we went down that path for 4.5 years. Wow.
And on the flip side of that question from Dan, what's some of the negatives or less favorable aspects that you've dealt with in the industry?
It's very dependent on what organization and the people involved with it, right? There were a lot of people for a while getting involved with hospitality who thought, particularly with bigger names, that they could make a fast buck and get out, or perhaps, you know, roll, as we touched on earlier, roll something out and make it a chain of something and upscale the numbers, because restaurants don't operate on a huge margin, right? It's not a gold mine. It's barely a tin mine. In fact, it's just about a hole in the ground. I mean, your busy days make your money, your quiet days write off the profit. And there's an old joke in the industry as well about holiday pay, which is you go on holiday you get your 2 weeks off, which you get paid for. But while you're away, 2 other people are doing all of your shifts and not getting paid overtime for them. So ultimately, there's no holiday pay. Now, you could expand that to the rest of the world, right? And go, it's not really any such thing as holiday pay. They just spread out what you're earning over the year across the weeks you get paid for. But anyway, that's slightly different. So the pitfalls, I would say, are when people who are creatively driven and have great experience or talent in cooking, and perhaps are half useful at organising a team of cooks to deliver a series of services over a period of days using fresh ingredients and manage that ordering and wastage process and make sure that everything's as tickety-boo as possible. When those people are then put under, let's say, business circumstance kind of pressures, you know, we want this to be a bigger number, we want that to be a smaller number, you need to do this, that's it. That is not good support or communication for your operations team if they haven't been trained or helped to understand what might be causing that. Now, I think that only happens when the people telling you that have looked at a spreadsheet, seen what's wrong with the numbers and told you to fix them, and they perhaps don't understand why the numbers are the way they are themselves. So maybe that's why they then don't communicate it to you. But you, after a while of that going on, you know, you weekly meetings with board members who have nothing to do with the industry outside of happening to be on the board start giving you contradictory directions from what will be good for your kitchen in terms of producing great food and having a happy team. That is ultimately, I think, what a lot of chefs end up leaving the industry for. There needs to be a much better switch over, much more support from businesses that own restaurants when it comes to taking creative people and turning them into business managers. Yeah, or maybe saying, okay, we'll put in an administrator to deal with these things and train you and work on them with you together. I'm not saying that all chefs would be open to that. I certainly probably have moments where I would have said, "You can jog on, mate, if you think you're telling me how to roast a potato." Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
So I think ultimately, when you get into a position where the business side of a restaurant isn't producing the numbers for whatever reason, maybe because it can't, maybe because you've designed an operation that's entirely fresh produce based, very labor intensive, and cannot ever earn you the kind of margin that you can with a more structured industrialized process. I think that for me in my career, personally speaking, I've always struggled when it's come to be the admin side of things, the business side of things.
So we also like to talk a little bit about what people can expect salary-wise. So we go away and we look at some figures and average data. And starting salaries for chefs nowadays seem to be around 16,000, and the average is between 20 and 24,000. Does that sound right to you?
Hang on. Well, let's just run some numbers. So 16,000 a year.
Yeah.
As a starter for a sort of perhaps someone who's done a 6-month entry course at college, maybe. Or they've done an apprenticeship, right? Okay, so they're not completely, bewildered. The 52 weeks in a year, and you get 4 off. That's 48, right? So 16,000 divided by. Hang on, I've just gone wrong on the calculator. 16,000. See, I told you I was no good at this. 16,000 divided by 48. That's £333 a week, right? So. Then let's divide that by an average chef working hours of, let's be generous, let's say 60 hours. Does that sound like a reasonable amount of time for a chef to work in a week? It will be even better. We'll go 55. I don't believe that any newly qualified chefs are working 55 hours a week. I expect they're doing more, but we'll chuck that in there.
Yep.
So we'll divide that 33 recurring by 55. What number do you get?
6.
Yeah, about 6.
So
yeah.
Now.
What's the national minimum wage for an 18-year-old?
What is it now?
Isn't it 9?
Is it 9 something
right?
now?
Oh, so we're getting 2/3 of. Is that right?
Well, is it? Because while you obviously said that 60 hours a week, that is not the normal working hours for anyone, really, is it?
Well, I think I would be very surprised if a chef wasn't working 55 hours a week. I know there are lots of people that say your contract is 45 hours and you probably end up doing 50, but a lot of that you wouldn't get overtimed on that. I still think right now that we have a long way to go, not just in our industry, but in a lot of other low-paid jobs, driving a van, whatever it is, which is something I have experience with recently, right? You know, you've got to pay people money they can afford to live on. And this is a bigger point. It's outside of my industry, right? But I think we've got to really start to look at the way things work.
I guess what we're saying here is you don't go into being a chef for money. You go into it with the passion and the desire to create something.
I hope so, because if you are just looking for money, and that's the kind of 16 grand a year job, you can get a comfy one with a chair, in normal hours. I'm sure. So certainly wouldn't recommend if you're going into. I really don't want this to be negative. I think anyone who's inspired by food, who thinks that cooking is for them, I encourage them to go and give it a go. I really, really do. But I encourage them to do it with the bravery and the mindset to say, I am not working in an unacceptable or irresponsible way for an unfair exchange.
Yeah, certainly.
And that's difficult when you're young, right? And when you're starting out, or even if you're starting out and you're not young, I get that, right? But I look back at my career previous independence and I think, God, I wish I'd been more bolshy. I wish I'd said, no, do you know what? I'm not going to work 70 hours next week just to make your restaurant work because I'm tired and you're not paying me enough. I wish I'd been more like that. Not to the extent where, you're just an impossible person to employ. But I think you should stand up for knowing what is right and honest and good. And there are loads of employers out there now, right? I will say this, things have improved dramatically in the last 10 years. And there are employers out there doing incredible stuff and they are to be applauded. And they are the future. If you want vibrant people to come and offer you their creativity on a daily basis, you just got to treat them right.
Yeah, I just want to jump back on those numbers slightly. So
because I got muddled, didn't I? Yeah.
So we obviously said that a chef generally works about 60 hours a week, whereas most contracts for people would probably be about 40 hours a week, and it may be 45 for a chef. They obviously do longer hours. So the average minimum wage for someone at 21 years old is £8.20, which if you were to do your contracted 40 hours a week, would you be actually getting £8.33? So maybe it is the businesses stepping on that little guy a little bit too much. And maybe, I don't know, is there any sort of unions out there for chefs?
There are. And there's some great resources to help people as well. But the problem is that, we've got to, as a society, and this isn't just in my industry, I think this is in every industry. I think, the constant effort is to look at the bottom line and say, these are the least responsible people. We have to give them the minimum amount we can possibly get away with.
Yeah.
Right. But that is built on a structure of fast, maximizing profit. Okay. Now, what maybe we should do is look at a more sustainable business model where perhaps it's more expensive to eat out. Maybe there's a bit more value placed on that. The scandal in the last few years about service charge being taken by the company.
Yeah.
50% of the service charge being taken by the company and only 50% of it going to the staff. These are not people who are being paid well. And you as a diner are giving extra money because they deserve it, because you've had a good experience.
Absolutely.
And they are not getting it. That is beyond selfish. Unless you're ring fencing that money for a training program or to get disadvantaged kids into your kitchen
correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, listen, I get it, and there's creative ways of doing that, and absolutely any money in a business that can be ring fenced for doing that sort of altruistic kind of work that not only supports the future of your industry but is making a valid and positive change for people's lives, is not to be knocked. But when it's, board members pocketing another dividend, when you've got 25-year-old kids burning themselves out, I don't think that's right. Having said that, there are a lot of pressures in a kitchen, and there's a lot of people that you think perhaps aren't worth more than minimum wage, but I think that's just an old-fashioned mindset. I think we need to look at that. Sorry, I got massively sidetracked there.
It's all right. So what would be something that's not in the job description that you have to deal with every now and then? I suppose that almost comes back to something you were talking about earlier of team management and the Excel spreadsheets that you probably didn't expect going in to be a chef.
No, man. I mean, at college, well, I was probably the last generation, I suppose, of kids at school who there were computers there, but we didn't really know what they were for. I mean, there was a few kids that knew what to do with them, right? And could probably do a bit of word processing at a push. Mind you, I don't think I'm much better now. But, the idea of a spreadsheet, I mean, I remember using one and being told to fill it in and deleting all the formulas and working everything out on a calculator and manually inputting it because I couldn't make it work. I mean, I can't be the only person that did that. All right, I'm 42. I'm old. But, there was now I think kids leave school with better, ability to manage stuff than that. And also the software's a lot more user-friendly than it used to be. So that's one thing. But also, hold tight. You want to be a young chef. There are times when you need to be able to rewire a plug on a piece of equipment in the kitchen that's broken and wrap the now bare wires in the plasters from the first aid kit, because if you don't fix that machine before service, it's game over, right? Despite the fact you're not qualified to do it and you shouldn't be touching it. If you're not prepared to stick your head down a manhole cover and scrape out armloads of solidified fat because the kitchen drains are starting to swell up, then there is a whole side to that job, right, that people definitely don't think about when they go into it. And that, if you're in a big hotel, they'll have maintenance people, right? That's different. But if you're in a small indie restaurant or a short chain of restaurants, it's very likely you're going to have to get your hands pretty dirty. I mean, that sort of thing.
So have you got any advice for any young people either wanting to get into it or getting into it about progression through the industry?
Yeah, man, definitely. Give yourself some time every month to just stop and think about what you're doing. I work with chefs a lot who've been in the same place for a long time and weren't interested in the food they were making. No, that's fine. Maybe they if they hadn't said, I don't really want to be doing this, then I would have got it. But if it's just a job and you go in and you do your job, that's one thing. But if you really have desires within food and you want to go and do them, then you should stick to that, right? So I always tried to stick to going to work for people whose food I was interested in. Occasionally, I take a job for better money, right? We've all done it. And usually that was a mistake. But focus on the broader picture. Don't get too sucked into working where you're working right now. Give it the best you can. But once you walk out the door, go and look at the rest of the industry for an hour in the evening. Talk to some other chefs who are working in different places. Keep in touch with the chefs you've worked with at other places. That's really important because they'll be able to steer you in the direction of opportunities and other cool stuff going on. And be aware of being honest to yourself, because the problem will arise when you don't want to go to work because you're doing stuff that actually is not what you wanted to do. So go and work for the people you want to work for. Try and do it as much as possible on the right terms, and be prepared to commit your evenings and your weekends to the industry, and you will get some great rewards out of it. I mean, I feel like I've been negative a lot.
No, I think you've just been honest about the industry, which is important.
But we can listen to, can hear your passion coming through for the industry and what you've done. So that's brilliant. And actually, that sort of leads on to the last question. Would you still go into the industry knowing everything you know now?
Oh God. I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger. God, would anyone relive their lives exactly? No, that wasn't the question. Would I go into the industry?
Yeah.
Do you know what? I mean, I would go back into the industry for the right job, on the right terms. There's no doubt about it. I mean, my problem personally was that I struggled to draw a line between my life at work and my life at home. And my life at work would always take over. And I would, my wife always says it was like you were having an affair, only your restaurant was the affair, and that was more important to you than your wife, and you didn't care if she knew it or not. And that mindset had been something that I built myself into for years. That didn't happen overnight. And I think that, I would definitely go back in. I would definitely go and do it again. And I would definitely do it in a much more sensible, grown up and certain way, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I think, you said you thought you'd been negative, but I just think you've been very honest about it. But that answer there sort of makes you realize that the industry is all about passion. Like the fact that you said, yes, it is difficult, but you'd still go back, for the right opportunity, and you just do it in the right way. And I think it's really important for anyone listening that you take Tim's advice and do value yourself when you go into a job.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't hang about, just because you're enjoying somewhere and you're really loving working there. If you've learned what you wanted to learn there and there's somewhere else to go, don't be tempted to hang around just because you're enjoying it, because you can get comfy in a restaurant with a good team. And every head chef out there will hate me for saying that, but because the typical thing in the industry is you get a chef, they work with you for a year, you get them where you want them to be, they're just turning out to be the most useful person in the kitchen, and they leave and work somewhere else. But every head chef should know that. You should know that's what's going to happen, because the whole point of a career progression for a cook is to go and work with others and bounce those ideas off their own and gather the skills and find out what they like and what they don't like, and then take them somewhere else. And if you get shirty about that, they'll never come back. Those guys will meet young chefs and say, you've got to go and work for this guy. And if you treat them well, they'll only ever send you really positive people who are going to do you a favour,
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Tim. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you, and it's been sort of very eye-opening about the industry.
Well, here's hoping I don't get letters from industry bodies telling me off. But I will finally, just one last time, caveat that by saying that was quite a long time ago. There's a lot of more forward-thinking, much more positive people in the industry now, and I hope that is the glorious future. Once we get through this terrible time that all of the industry is facing right now, that there is a brighter time ahead for all those creative people working in a brilliant industry. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Where can people find you on social media and anywhere else?
Lurking in the background usually. I'm definitely on Twitter, and I'm definitely on Instagram. I think it's at Tim Maddams Chef on Instagram, and I think it's at Chef Tim Maddams on Twitter, one or the other. But both feeds are on my website, which is creatively titled Tim Maddams. So that's not because I'm self-obsessed, although I might be, but it's just because it seemed very simple to call it that.
Well, thank you once again. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.